Chapter 22, Interview, Enterprise Experiences. Stephanie Walter is a user researcher and designer who focuses on building user-centered, inclusive, and accessible products and services. She spent the last 12-plus years helping her clients deliver successful projects in different industries including banking, finance, automotive, healthcare, press, and travel. She likes to share her passion for her UX work all around the world. Her successful blog and presentations at conferences and workshops discuss a wide range of topics including mobile UX, enterprise UX, cognitive biases, inclusive design, design process, and designer-developer relationships. You can follow her on social media for curated UX design content. Web link: Stephanie Walter, StephanieWalter.design. Debbie, how do you define customer centricity? Steph, customer centricity would be making sure that when you build a product that you understand and follow your users' needs, you make sure that those are higher priorities. A customer-centric company would prioritize the things that will benefit the user the most, maybe not the stakeholders. But it's a balance between finding a way to bring what the stakeholder needs because at some point, they want to make money as well. If you're customer-centric, you try to make that money while still building what the customer needs as the highest priority. Debbie, you're our enterprise experience expert. Would you still use the same definition for an enterprise type of environment? Steph, I would maybe replace customer with employee in this definition to make it clearer. In enterprise UX, you usually have two kinds of products. You have the one that you bought, for example, SAP or Microsoft Office. The second kind is products built inside this enterprise for our end users, who are our employees. Those employees are not paying for the product. It might be an internal budget going from one hand to another. And since this is for our employees, I would say efficiency is often the key metric. Whenever we are involved in change management, one of the biggest concerns is, "You've changed this. I'm going to waste so much time. I'll be less productive." Enterprise customers' needs and values are a little bit different, maybe a little more pragmatic. They want to be productive. They don't want to waste time. Debbie, many companies don't care if workers struggle with the tool or system. They don't care if people are inefficient. Steph, when I was working for the university, the intranet was a nightmare, so we created a fun game. My colleague was looking for a phone number on the intranet, and I went downstairs to the reception to ask for that phone number. We found that it was more efficient for me to go downstairs to the reception, ask for the phone number, and go back up to the third floor than for her to find the number on the intranet. Then they did some real tests and basic task analysis based on things someone might do on the intranet. They checked how long it took them and if they failed or not. A lot of people failed. We then had this weird metric. How much time does the task take? What is the average salary of the people doing the task? If the intranet requires double the work, it might cost that much money for you. It's the sunk cost fallacy. We've invested this much, why would we change it? The cost of a poorly designed interface is sometimes hidden. We have the same issue in banks and other big companies that bought software packages years ago and they don't want to change them. They're trying to train users on them. Sometimes they pick the cheapest tool in the box or they choose to outsource to the cheapest company. It might take maybe 2 or 3 years to discover that this was a shitty package, but they don't care because they're often not at that job anymore. I get the impression that's why we end up with packages that don't really work. People try to find the cheapest one. Sometimes at the end of the year, the unused budget can be converted into a bonus for people. That's the worst idea possible. People are like, okay, you mean that I have this envelope of money. If I buy the cheapest stuff, I can split what's left between me and two other people? What do you think will happen? That person will take some shortcuts, they will compromise on the tool, and they will say, yeah, good enough. Anyway, in 3 years, I'm not here anymore. I've jumped to the next company or to the next position, and this will not be my mess to clean anymore. Debbie, I once had to put in an official bid to provide software training to an American government agency. I asked if they were going to check for any qualifications, since I'm one of the few recommended trainers for that software. They said that their policy says they must look for the lowest bid. Well, good luck getting quality. Steph, I noticed that in some places you have a risk manager and those types of roles. I don't know if they're consulted when it comes to buying software or tools. The people who are responsible for deciding to invest money in either buying or building a tool should be the ones doing the math. But the problem is that most of the time they end up with shitty KPIs. If the KPI says you need to do something with as little budget as possible, that's what you do. You can't blame human beings for being human beings. It's about helping leaders and managers understand that just because you have an easy-to-measure KPI doesn't mean it's the right KPI. Debbie, can you think of some of the bad KPIs you've seen, and why were they bad? Steph, how many contracts did we sign? There's always a certain amount of time, usually 1 month, where you can say, I signed this contract, but I want to retract and cancel the contract. What happens when you need to sign that many contracts this year? In December, you have a peak in contract signing. In January, half of the contracts get canceled. Is this reflected somewhere in those objectives and metrics? Do they also measure how many were canceled? Maybe the problem is that the KPI is only measured by the end of the year. There's some wild stuff that people do with budgets. At some point in France, the army had a budget for gas. If they don't consume the gas, they have a smaller budget next year because they didn't need so much gas. Maybe it's a rumor, but I heard that sometimes they circle vehicles around just to consume gas. As soon as you have a poorly constructed KPI, people will try to game the system to keep something or get rid of something. It's human nature. But do our higher-level leaders and execs understand this? Do they care? Someone presented NPS to me. They took everyone that was neutral and they put them with positives so they could say, oh, we only have that many people who don't like the interface. Technically, the data was not wrong, but it was the way they presented that data. Going back to KPIs, a lot of people have yearly objectives, but should it be measured for a year or a longer period to remove the temptation to play games? If you have a longer-term objective, that might give you longer-term focus because customer centricity is not a short-term goal. It's a long-term goal. If you have super short-term goals, how are you supposed to be customer-centric in the long term? I heard about a job offer that said your 6-month goal was the growth of how many people signed up for the product. In 6 months, you have to show at least, let's say, 10% growth. So you hire someone. It takes them 2 months to understand the company and the products, but in 6 months, that company wanted them to already have more than 10% growth in the people who sign up. Do you know how long it can take to do this? Do the research, design it, have developers implement it, test it, push it to production. Even some fast and agile teams need 6 months for some features because there's other stuff in the backlog. Plus, they do heavy testing as well, like usability tests, and regression tests. I'm nevertheless happy that they put that 6-month goal into the offer because it shows how little they understand the job. You don't want to work for them. Debbie, what other things can you suggest for enterprise organizations to be more customer-centric or employee-centric? Steph, the main trick is to understand how people in the trenches use your product. I'm pretty sure that if someone in a higher position who makes product decisions spent a whole day trying to work with the tool, they would stop saying it's good enough. Think about some of the people in our company who are less tech-savvy. If you watch them work, you can understand why they complain about our product. Often teams don't want to hear those complaints, but we need to see the reality of people who use our product every day to understand how annoying it can be to include the same data in 3 different systems because there's no communication between the systems. People don't understand how complicated someone else's job might be. Debbie, I remember an article about a delivery service making everybody, even developers, spend a day doing bicycle deliveries, and everybody lost their minds and thought that this was terrible and unfair. Steph, it's complicated because they had to do it for only one day. This one day can help them understand a little bit better what the problems are. I don't like the word empathy, but at least understanding. That can be a good thing as well. It's easy for developers to say that it's not a big problem, but then this is only one day. If you are forced to use a company-provided system on a daily basis, just using it for one day might not be enough to understand all the issues and pain points. I had that happen to me last week. I was teaching, and normally the session is recorded and available automatically as a replay to the students. But we had a technical problem. The assistant called support. Support acted like, yeah, we lost 3 hours of teaching. That's a super small detail, and it's okay. The assistant wasn't happy. Maybe you don't care, but now I have 3 teachers who are paid by the hour who have to re-record the whole lesson. They will not get paid because it's not in their contract. This is not okay. And how do we make sure that it's not going to happen again? People demand better experiences. They have free tools like Google. They compare Google with the enterprise tools they have to use on a daily basis. They wonder why they have to send a Word document to their colleague. The colleague adds a comment and sends it back. Compare that to a shared Google Doc where everyone edits or comments at the same time. I'm super happy when users report things. Some people say they're just complaining, but I say, no, that's not complaining. That's feedback, and it means they care. They want to make it better. They want to be more efficient. Doing the same thing often in an efficient way might drive you mad. This is a waste of my time. I could be doing other things and more interesting things. If you have to do the same thing 3 times instead of only doing it once, you might ask yourself at the end of the day, what am I doing here? I'm copy-pasting stuff in fields that could be automated. It's difficult because in enterprise, most of the time, the tools were built inside the company. They don't really have competitors. But it can still be an argument to say, if I have to work with that, I will be way less efficient.